Stoic vs Emotionless. There's a scene in the movie Gladiator where Russell Crowe's character, Maximus, learns that his family has been murdered. He doesn't scream. He doesn't cry. He doesn't break down. He simply closes his eyes, takes a breath, and continues planning his next move. The audience watches this and thinks, now that's stoic. But here's the problem with that scene and why it represents the most dangerous misconception about Stoicism that's destroying people's lives. I'm about to show you the difference between being stoic and being emotionless, and why confusing these two will turn you into exactly the kind of person the ancient Stoics would have pitted. Because real Stoicism isn't about becoming a robot. It's about becoming more human, not less. The great misunderstanding? Let me paint you a picture of what most people think Stoicism looks like. You wake up in the morning and your dog has died overnight. A true Stoic, according to popular belief, would simply shrug and say, well, death is natural. Next. Your business fails? External circumstances don't affect me. Your child is struggling in school? I cannot control other people's outcomes. This version of Stoicism turns you into what I call an emotional zombie, technically alive but dead to the richness of human experience. And it's not just wrong, it's the opposite of what the Stoics actually taught. Marcus Aurelius wept when his children died. Seneca grieved deeply when his friend Lucilius lost someone close to him. Epictetus spoke passionately about justice and virtue. The confusion comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what emotions actually are and how the Stoics related to them. Most people think there are only two options: be controlled by your emotions or suppress them entirely. But the Stoics discovered a third way that modern psychology is only now beginning to understand. Here's what actually happened in ancient Rome and Greece. The Stoics were some of the most emotionally intelligent people of their time. They were beloved teachers, trusted advisors, and inspiring leaders precisely because they could feel deeply while thinking clearly. They understood that emotions contain valuable information, but they also recognized that emotional reactions often lead to poor decisions and unnecessary suffering. So they developed a sophisticated system for working with emotions rather than against them or without them. They made a crucial distinction that changes everything: the difference between initial emotional impressions and sustained emotional states. This distinction is the key to understanding why Stoicism makes you more emotionally intelligent, not less. The Stoic Emotional System. Let me explain how emotions actually work according to Stoic psychology, because this will completely change how you think about feelings. The Stoics identified 4 stages in any emotional experience, and understanding these stages gives you tremendous power over your emotional life. Stage 1 is the initial impression or fantasia. Something happens, you lose your job, someone insults you, you receive unexpected good news, and your brain immediately generates an emotional response. This happens automatically and isn't under your direct control. A Stoic doesn't try to prevent these initial feelings any more than they would try to prevent their heart from beating. Stage 2 is recognition. You notice the initial emotion arising. Most people skip right past this stage because they're not paying attention to their internal experience. But Stoics train themselves to catch emotions as they emerged, like a skilled mechanic who can hear when an engine isn't running properly. Stage 3 is the crucial moment: assent or rejection. This is where your power lies. You can choose to assent to the initial impression, meaning you accept it as accurate and important, or you can examine it more carefully. A Stoic might feel initial anger when treated unfairly, but instead of immediately assenting to thoughts like, "This is terrible," or "I must get revenge," they pause and ask, "Is this interpretation helpful? Is my anger providing useful information? How would the wisest version of myself respond?" Stage 4 is the sustained emotional state that results from your choice in Stage 3. If you assent to unhelpful interpretations, you create sustained suffering. If you examine your initial impressions and choose wise responses, you often find that the initial emotion naturally dissolves or transforms into something more useful, like determination, compassion, or focused action. This process isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming responsible instead of reactive. You're not suppressing emotions, you're developing the capacity to work skillfully with them. The difference is enormous. What emotionless actually looks like. Now let me show you what actual emotional suppression looks like, because it's important that you recognize this pattern if it's happening in your life or in people around you. Emotionally suppressed people don't just avoid negative emotions, they become incapable of experiencing positive ones fully as well. They might not get angry when mistreated, but they also don't feel joy when something wonderful happens. They don't experience grief when they lose something important, but they also don't feel gratitude for what they have. They protect themselves from disappointment by not hoping for anything, but this same mechanism prevents them from feeling satisfaction when things go well. Emotional suppression is like taking a painkiller for a broken leg. It might reduce the immediate discomfort, but it doesn't heal the underlying injury, and it prevents you from getting the information you need to address the real problem. Suppressed emotions don't disappear, they go underground where they influence your behavior in ways you don't recognize or understand. People who suppress emotions often become passive-aggressive because they can't express frustration directly. They might become workaholics because they're avoiding feelings of inadequacy. They often struggle with intimacy because genuine connection requires emotional vulnerability. They may appear strong and unflappable on the surface, but underneath they're often anxious, lonely, and disconnected from their own values and desires. This is the opposite of Stoic flourishing. The Stoics wanted to feel deeply and love fully while maintaining the wisdom to respond skillfully to whatever life brought them. They weren't trying to protect themselves from life, they were trying to engage with it more skillfully. How Stoics actually handle emotions. Let me give you some concrete examples of how a practicing Stoic might handle common emotional situations, because the difference between Stoic and emotionless responses is dramatic when you see them side by side. Scenario 1. Your romantic partner breaks up with you unexpectedly. An emotionally suppressed person might say, "I don't care. Relationships don't matter anyway. I'm better off alone." They would avoid feeling the pain of loss by convincing themselves that what they lost wasn't valuable. A Stoic would acknowledge the full reality of their feelings. "I feel deeply sad about losing this relationship. I cared about this person and hoped we would build a life together. This hurts, and that's natural because I'm human and I form attachments." But then they would examine their thoughts. Is my suffering coming from the loss itself or from my resistance to the loss? Can I honor what this relationship meant to me while accepting that it's over? What can I learn from this experience? How can I use this pain to become wiser and more compassionate? The Stoic feels the emotion fully but doesn't get trapped in stories that increase suffering unnecessarily. They don't tell themselves, "I'll never find love again," or "I'm not worthy of a good relationship." They experience grief without adding layers of self-pity, blame, or catastrophic thinking. Scenario 2. You work hard on a project and your boss takes credit for your ideas. An emotionally suppressed person might think, "It doesn't matter. Recognition is meaningless anyway. I don't need appreciation from others." They would avoid feeling angry or disappointed by pretending not to care about fairness or acknowledgement. A Stoic would recognize their initial feelings of frustration and disappointment. "I feel angry that my work isn't being acknowledged. I put effort into this project and I hope to receive recognition." It's natural to want fairness and appreciation. But then they would examine the situation. Is my anger providing useful information? Yes, it's telling me that I value integrity and fairness. How can I respond in a way that honors these values? Can I address this situation directly and diplomatically? If not, what can I learn about choosing projects and collaborators in the future? The Stoic doesn't suppress their desire for recognition or pretend that fairness doesn't matter. They acknowledge these values while focusing their energy on what they can actually control: their own integrity, their future choices, and their response to the current situation. The neuroscience behind emotional intelligence. Modern neuroscience validates exactly what the Stoics discovered through careful observation and practice. When you regularly pause between emotional triggers and your responses, you literally strengthen the neural pathways associated with executive function and emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for conscious decision-making, becomes more active and robust. The amygdala, which triggers fight or flight responses, becomes less reactive to everyday stressors. You're not damaging your capacity for emotion, you're upgrading your emotional operating system. Studies show that people who practice emotional awareness and regulation, which is essentially what the Stoics were doing, experience more positive emotions, not fewer. They report higher levels of life satisfaction, better relationships, and greater resilience during difficult times. This makes perfect sense when you think about it. If you're not wasting emotional energy on reactions that don't serve you, you have more energy available for experiences that do. Research also demonstrates that emotional suppression, on the other hand, is associated with higher levels of anxiety, depression, and physical health problems. Suppressed emotions require constant mental energy to maintain, leaving less capacity for creativity, problem-solving, and genuine connection with others. The Stoics were practicing what psychologists now call emotional intelligence, or emotional regulation, not emotional suppression. They were developing what researchers call metacognitive awareness, the ability to think about your thinking and feel your feelings without being overwhelmed by either. Practical differences in daily life. Let me show you what this looks like in everyday situations, because understanding the principle is only valuable if you can apply it practically. When stuck in traffic, an emotionally suppressed person might sit there blank-faced, telling themselves that external circumstances don't affect them. But underneath, tension builds in their body, and they might snap at their family when they get home without even realizing why. A Stoic would notice their initial frustration. I feel impatient and annoyed. I wanted to arrive on time and now I might be late. This matters to me because I value respecting other people's time. Then they would examine their options. Is my frustration helping me move through traffic faster? No. Can I control the traffic? No. What can I control? My response to this situation. I can use this time to practice patience, listen to something educational, or simply appreciate having a few unexpected minutes to think. The Stoic feels the initial frustration but chooses a response that serves their values and well-being. They don't pretend not to care about being late, but they don't waste energy fighting reality either. When receiving criticism at work, an emotionally suppressed person might appear completely unaffected, nodding politely while internally either shutting down or building resentment. A Stoic would pay attention to their emotional response. I feel defensive and hurt. Part of me wants to argue or explain why this criticism isn't fair. These feelings tell me that I care about doing good work and being respected. Then they would examine the criticism itself. Is there truth in what I'm hearing, even if it's delivered poorly? Can I separate useful feedback from personal attack? How can I respond in a way that shows I'm open to growth while maintaining my dignity? The Stoic uses their emotional response as information while choosing their actual response based on wisdom rather than reactivity. The integration challenge? Here's where many people get confused when they start practicing Stoicism. They begin by trying to apply Stoic principles, but they're still operating from an emotionally suppressive mindset. They try to force themselves not to care about things that naturally matter to them. This creates internal conflict and often leads to giving up on Stoicism entirely. True Stoic practice requires what I call caring detachment. You care deeply about your values, your relationships, and your contributions to the world. You feel joy, sadness, excitement, and disappointment just like any other human being. But you hold these caring feelings lightly, recognizing that your fundamental well-being doesn't depend on any particular outcome. This is perhaps the most sophisticated emotional skill humans can develop, and it takes time and practice to master. You're learning to love without possessiveness, to strive without desperation, to feel without being controlled by your feelings. It's the difference between being emotionally intelligent and being emotionally shut down. The path forward. If you recognize that you've been suppressing emotions in the name of Stoicism, the path forward isn't to swing to the opposite extreme and become emotionally reactive. It's to gradually develop the skills of emotional awareness and wise response. Start by simply noticing your emotions as they arise without immediately judging them as good or bad. Practice what the Stoics called objective representation, describing your feelings without adding interpretive stories. Instead of, "This is terrible," try, "I notice I'm feeling disappointed." Instead of, "I'm so stupid," try, "I'm experiencing self-critical thoughts." Then practice the pause that gives you choice. When you notice an emotion arising, take a breath before responding. Ask yourself, what is this feeling telling me? Is it providing useful information? How would I advise a good friend in this situation? What response would I be proud of when I look back on this moment? Remember that developing emotional skills is like developing physical fitness. You wouldn't expect to run a marathon after a week of training, and you shouldn't expect to master emotional intelligence after a few days of practice. Be patient with yourself while staying committed to growth. The true Stoic life. A life guided by genuine Stoic principles is full of emotion, connection, and engagement with the world. Marcus Aurelius felt profound love for his family and deep concern for his subjects. Seneca experienced genuine friendship and passionate interest in learning. Epictetus felt joy in teaching and compassion for his students' struggles. What made them Stoic wasn't the absence of emotion but the presence of wisdom in how they related to their emotions. They felt deeply while thinking clearly. They cared passionately while holding outcomes lightly. They engaged fully with life while maintaining perspective on what truly mattered. This is the invitation of Stoicism. Not to become less human, but to become more skillfully human. Not to feel less but to feel more wisely. Not to care about nothing but to care about the right things in the right way. The Stoics discovered that when you stop fighting your emotions or being controlled by them, you free up enormous energy for creating the kind of life that truly satisfies your deepest values and aspirations. That's the difference between being Stoic and being emotionless. One leads to wisdom, connection, and genuine peace. The other leads to isolation, numbness, and a kind of living death. Choose wisdom. Choose to feel. Choose to respond rather than react. Choose to become the kind of person who can handle whatever life brings while remaining fully alive to its beauty and meaning.